My sister said I wasn't family anymore. She forgot whose name was on Dad's will. The first thing my sister did after our father's funeral was hand me a cardboard box. "These are your things," she said. I looked down. Inside were a few old photo albums, 2 sweaters, and a framed picture of my parents on their wedding day. That was it. No discussion. No invitation inside. No, "How are you holding up?" Just a box. Then she smiled. A smile so calm it almost made me question whether I'd imagined the last 20 years. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways now." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean Dad's gone. There's really no reason for us to pretend anymore." Pretend. That single word hit harder than the funeral. Before I could answer, her husband stepped onto the porch and quietly pulled the front door shut behind him. Not slammed. Just closed, like I no longer belonged inside the house I'd helped keep standing. I picked up the box, turned toward my car, and that's when I noticed something. Dad's lawyer was walking up the driveway. He looked from me to my sister, then frowned. "You haven't opened the second envelope yet?" My sister's confident smile disappeared, because she had no idea there was a second envelope, and everything she thought she owned was about to change. "My name is Emily. I'm 38 years old. For most of my life, I believed family meant showing up, even when no one noticed. I wasn't loud. I wasn't demanding. I simply did what needed to be done. When Mom died 12 years ago, Dad changed. The strongest man I'd ever known suddenly forgot birthdays, skipped meals, and sometimes sat on the porch for hours without saying a word. My older sister, Rachel, lived only 20 minutes away, but weeks would pass without her visiting. She always had a reason. Work was busy. The kids had soccer. Traffic was terrible. Life was complicated. Meanwhile, I drove nearly an hour every evening after work just to make sure Dad had eaten dinner. At first, I thought it would only be for a few weeks. Those weeks became years. I filled his refrigerator, paid bills he quietly hid in kitchen drawers, scheduled doctor appointments, cleaned the gutters, changed light bulbs, repaired broken appliances. I never kept score. He was my father. That's what daughters do. At least that's what I believed. Rachel saw things differently. Whenever she did visit, she acted like she'd been carrying the whole family herself. She'd stay 20 minutes, bring expensive pastries Dad barely touched, take a few smiling pictures, post them online with captions about cherishing family. Then she'd leave before the coffee finished brewing. People loved those pictures. They commented about what a wonderful daughter she was. I never replied. The truth doesn't always fit inside a photograph. Dad noticed more than people realized. One evening, while we were washing dishes together, he asked me something strange. "Emily, if one day I'm not here, will you still come by the house?" I laughed. "What kind of question is that?" He didn't laugh. "I just wonder who really loves a place, and who only loves what might be inside it." At the time, I thought grief was making him philosophical. Now I know he was testing something. Looking back, there were signs everywhere. I just didn't understand them yet. A month before he died, Rachel suddenly started visiting every weekend. She brought groceries. She offered to organize paperwork. She insisted on knowing where every important document was kept. She even convinced Dad to give her a spare house key. I remember thinking, this is wonderful. Maybe she'd finally realized how precious time was. I wanted to believe that. Dad didn't say much, but every time Rachel asked another question about bank accounts, insurance papers, or the house, I'd catch him watching her with tired eyes. Not angry, not surprised, just disappointed. The week before he passed away, he asked me to drive him into town. He refused to tell me why. We stopped outside a small law office. "I won't be long," he said. He was inside nearly an hour. When he came back, he looked lighter somehow, as if he'd finally put down something heavy he'd been carrying for years. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled. "It will be." Then he changed the subject. I never asked again. 3 days later, Dad was gone, and less than 2 hours after we buried him, Rachel handed me that cardboard box. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea Dad had planned for one final conversation. He just wasn't going to be the one delivering it. Part 2. The lawyer stopped a few feet from us, still holding his leather briefcase. He looked at Rachel first. I assumed everyone would still be inside. Rachel recovered quickly. "We've already finished." Dad left everything exactly the way he wanted. The lawyer didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me. "Miss Carter, would you mind coming back inside?" Rachel frowned. "What second envelope?" He adjusted his glasses. "Your father instructed me to deliver it only after the funeral, in front of everyone, For the first time that day, Rachel looked uncertain. We walked back into the house, the same living room where we'd celebrated birthdays. Christmas mornings and Sunday dinners suddenly felt unfamiliar. My Aunt Linda and Uncle George were still there, finishing coffee with a few cousins. Everyone looked up as we entered. The lawyer placed his briefcase on the dining table. "I apologize for the delay," he said. "Traffic was heavier than expected." Rachel folded her arms. "Can we make this quick?" He nodded. "Of course." He opened the briefcase and removed a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed, with dark blue wax. My father's handwriting covered the front, to be opened only after my family has gathered. The room fell silent. Rachel forced a smile. "I don't understand why Dad made this so dramatic." Neither did I, until the lawyer broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. He cleared his throat. "I'm reading exactly as your father instructed." He began, "If you're hearing this, then I'm no longer sitting in my favorite chair pretending. I don't need help reaching the top shelf." A few people smiled through their tears. That sounded exactly like Dad. "First, thank you to everyone who came today. Funerals have a funny way of reminding us who still has time for each other." The lawyer paused before continuing. "Now I need to clear up something important." Rachel straightened in her chair. "Over the last several years, many people have told me how lucky I am to have such a devoted family. Some visited often, some visited rarely. Some loved me loudly. One loved me quietly." I lowered my eyes. I already knew who he meant. The loud kind is easy for everyone to see. The quiet kind keeps the lights on, fills the refrigerator, drives to appointments, fixes broken things, and asks for nothing in return. Nobody moved. Nobody even coughed. The lawyer kept reading. "Emily, every meal you cooked, every prescription you picked up, every evening you sacrificed after work." I noticed. My throat tightened. I hadn't expected that. "You always thought I wasn't paying attention." I was. Across the room, Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Dad's words were gentle, but they landed like stones. "Rachel." The lawyer looked up briefly before continuing. "I love you because you're my daughter. That will never change. But love doesn't erase truth." Rachel's face went pale. "Too many of your visits began with questions about money. Too many ended before the dishes were washed. You loved the idea of being seen as a good daughter. Emily simply became one." Nobody dared look at Rachel. The silence was almost unbearable. Then came the sentence none of us expected. "Everything I've done in the last month has one purpose." The lawyer unfolded another sheet. "To make sure my final decision reflects actions, not appearances." Rachel suddenly leaned forward. "What decision?" The lawyer ignored the interruption. Instead, he reached into the envelope again. This time, he pulled out another document. It wasn't a letter. It was a property deed. Rachel smiled again. "There it is." She looked at me with quiet satisfaction. "I told you Dad wanted me to have the house." The lawyer slowly shook his head. "I'm afraid that's not what this says." Rachel blinked. "What?" He turned the document toward all of us. "The property was transferred 3 weeks before Mr. Carter passed away." Every head in the room snapped toward him. Rachel stared in disbelief. "Transferred to who?" The lawyer looked directly at me. "The new owner of this home." He paused. "Is Emily Carter." Rachel shot to her feet so fast her chair crashed onto the hardwood floor. "That's impossible." "It was legally executed," the lawyer replied calmly. "Witnessed, notarized, and recorded with the county." Rachel's face turned bright red. No. Dad promised me this house," the lawyer answered quietly. "According to his written records, he made no such promise." She looked at me as if I'd stolen something. I hadn't. I was just as shocked as everyone else. Then the lawyer spoke again. "And before anyone assumes this is the entire inheritance," he reached back into the briefcase. "There is still one final document." The room froze. Because whatever was inside that folder had been important enough for my father to keep completely secret until after his death. Nobody spoke. The only sound in the room was the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Rachel's hands were shaking. She looked ready to tear the papers out of the lawyer's hands. What else could there possibly be? The lawyer carefully opened the final folder. "This document isn't about money." Rachel let out a short laugh. "Then it doesn't matter." The lawyer looked directly at her. "Your father disagreed." He unfolded another letter. "This one is addressed to the entire family." He began reading. "If you've made it this far, then I know exactly what's happening in this room." Several people exchanged nervous glances. "Rachel is probably angry." Rachel's expression hardened. Emily is probably confused. That one was true. And everyone else is wondering why I divided things this way. The lawyer continued, because I didn't divide them by love. I divided them by responsibility. The room became even quieter. A house isn't a reward. It's work. It needs someone who understands sacrifice. Someone who fixes broken things instead of pretending they aren't broken. I felt my eyes burning. Dad wasn't just talking about the house anymore. He was talking about people. Emily has already been carrying this family for years. I'm simply giving her the keys to the place she's already been protecting. Rachel suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. She turned toward me. You manipulated him. I stared at her. I wasn't even in the lawyer's office. You didn't have to be. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You turned him against me. Before I could answer, someone else did. That's enough. Every head turned. It was Uncle George. Normally, he avoided family arguments like they were contagious. Not today. I visited your father more than you know, he said quietly. I saw who was there. Rachel folded her arms. You don't know what you're talking about. I do. He looked around the room. Every time I stopped by, Emily's car was already outside. Nobody interrupted him. She wasn't there for photographs. She wasn't there when it was convenient. She was there because someone had to be. Rachel looked toward Aunt Linda, waiting, expecting support. Instead, Aunt Linda lowered her eyes. I've wanted to say something for years. Rachel frowned. What? You always talked about taking care of your father. She paused. But every time I visited, Emily was the one actually doing it. Rachel's confidence began slipping away. One by one, people started remembering. The neighbor who'd seen me mowing Dad's lawn every Saturday. The pharmacist who knew my name because I picked up every prescription. The mechanic who remembered me paying for Dad's car repairs. The church volunteer who'd watched me wheel Dad inside every Sunday after his knees became too weak. None of them had planned to speak. But once the truth started coming out, it wouldn't stop. Rachel looked around the room as if she'd suddenly become a stranger. No, they're exaggerating. They don't know everything. Then something unexpected happened. Her husband, Mark, quietly cleared his throat. She looked at him. Tell them. He didn't. Instead, he stared at the floor. Mark? Still nothing. Finally, he spoke so softly we almost missed it. Emily did more. Rachel froze. What did you say? I said, Emily did more. She took a step toward him. You told me Dad was fine. I told you what he told me. And what about all those weekends? Mark looked exhausted. You usually wanted to leave after 20 minutes. Rachel's face drained of color. You said nothing. I tried. You didn't listen. For years. Mark had stayed silent. Now in less than a minute. He'd said more than he had in the previous decade. Rachel looked completely alone. Then the lawyer spoke again. I'm afraid there's one more thing your father asked me to deliver. Rachel laughed bitterly. Of course there is. The lawyer reached into the briefcase one last time. He placed a small silver key on the dining table. Everyone stared at it. What is that? I asked. A safe deposit box key. Rachel shrugged. So? The lawyer answered calmly. Inside is something your father wanted Emily to open. Exactly 30 days after his funeral. My heart skipped. What's inside? I don't know. I've never seen it. But your father smiled when he locked it. He handed me a sealed envelope. These are the instructions. I turned it over. Dad's handwriting covered the front. Emily, what you're about to discover explains everything I never told you. I suddenly realized the inheritance wasn't over. It had only just begun. For the next month, I barely thought about the safe deposit box. Not because I wasn't curious, because I was exhausted. Grief has a strange way of pushing everything else into the background. The funeral was over. The flowers had wilted. The casseroles stopped arriving, and life slowly became quiet again. Except Rachel refused to let it. 3 days after the funeral, she called. I want the house. I took a slow breath. It isn't mine because I wanted it. It's mine because Dad decided. You manipulated him. I didn't. You must have. She hung up before I could answer. Then the messages started. Some were angry. Some were pleading. Some accused me of stealing our father's last years. I answered only once. I love Dad. I won't apologize for that. After that, I stopped responding. The following weekend, I unlocked the front door and walked into the house alone. For the first time, it felt different. Not because I owned it, because Dad wasn't sitting in his favorite chair. The silence hurt. I wandered from room to room. His reading glasses were still on the kitchen counter. His favorite coffee mug sat beside the sink. His old jacket still hung behind the pantry door. Everything looked exactly the same, except the one person who made it home was gone. I sat in his recliner and cried harder than I had at the funeral, because grief doesn't always arrive when people are watching. Sometimes it waits until you're finally alone. Over the next few weeks, I began cleaning, not to erase him, to preserve him. Every drawer held another memory. Every shelf told another story. Inside the garage, I found a notebook. Dad had always written little reminders. Oil change. Buy birdseed. Call Emily. That last one appeared dozens of times. Not because he forgot my number. Because he liked hearing my voice. I smiled through tears. Then I noticed something tucked inside the notebook. A folded receipt. It was from a hardware store. On the back, Dad had scribbled one sentence. The people who love you never make you wonder. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. I still carry it today. 30 days passed faster than I expected. The morning finally arrived. I drove to the bank carrying the small silver key. The same lawyer met me there. So, he asked gently, "Are you ready?" I think so. He unlocked a heavy steel door. Rows of metal boxes stretched across the wall. He found Dad's number, turned the key, pulled out a long gray box, then quietly left me alone. My hands were trembling. I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't cash, or jewelry, or gold. It held something far more valuable. Letters. Dozens of them, each neatly labeled. Emily, Rachel, Tyler, Olivia, my niece. Even letters addressed to future grandchildren who hadn't even been born. Beneath them sat a thick leather journal. My father's journal. I opened the first page. If you're reading this, then my voice is gone. So I'll borrow these pages instead. My throat tightened. Page after page, Dad had written about everything. The day Mom died, the fear he hid from us, the loneliness, the mistakes he believed he'd made. Then I reached an entry dated almost 2 years earlier. Today I watched Emily replace the water heater. She thought I was asleep. She paid the plumber before I could argue. Later, Rachel called. She asked whether I'd decided what would happen to the house. I stopped breathing. Dad had noticed everything. Every visit, every absence, every sacrifice, every disappointment. He never confronted Rachel. He simply wrote the truth. Then I found one final envelope taped inside the back cover. Across the front, he'd written, "Read this only after you've finished everything else." I opened it. Inside was one page. "Emily, there is one last thing I need you to do for me. Don't punish your sister." I frowned. She has spent her whole life believing love is something you earn by winning. She doesn't understand that love was never a competition. One day she will realize what she truly lost. When that day comes, if your heart allows it, open the door. Tears blurred the words. Dad wasn't asking me to give away the house. He wasn't asking me to forget. He was asking me not to become bitter. As I carefully folded the letter, my phone rang. Rachel, for the first time in over a month. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Dad's final request. I answered. Her voice was barely recognizable. Soft, broken. "Emily." She paused. "I need to tell you something." There was no anger, no accusation, only tears. That last one appeared dozens of times. Not because he forgot my number. Because he liked hearing my voice. I smiled through tears. Then I noticed something tucked inside the notebook. A folded receipt. It was from a hardware store. On the back, Dad had scribbled one sentence. The people who love you never make you wonder. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. I still carry it today. 30 days passed faster than I expected. The morning finally arrived. I drove to the bank carrying the small silver key. The same lawyer met me there. So, he asked gently, "Are you ready?" I think so. He unlocked a heavy steel door. Rows of metal boxes stretched across the wall. He found Dad's number, turned the key, pulled out a long gray box, then quietly left me alone. My hands were trembling. I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't cash, or jewelry, or gold. It held something far more valuable. Letters. Dozens of them, each neatly labeled. Emily, Rachel, Tyler, Olivia, my niece. Even letters addressed to future grandchildren who hadn't even been born. Beneath them sat a thick leather journal. My father's journal. I opened the first page. If you're reading this, then my voice is gone. So I'll borrow these pages instead. My throat tightened. Page after page, Dad had written about everything. The day Mom died, the fear he hid from us, the loneliness, the mistakes he believed he'd made. Then I reached an entry dated almost 2 years earlier. Today I watched Emily replace the water heater. She thought I was asleep. She paid the plumber before I could argue. Later, Rachel called. She asked whether I'd decided what would happen to the house. I stopped breathing. Dad had noticed everything. Every visit, every absence, every sacrifice, every disappointment. He never confronted Rachel. He simply wrote the truth. Then I found one final envelope taped inside the back cover. Across the front, he'd written, "Read this only after you've finished everything else." I opened it. Inside was one page. "Emily, there is one last thing I need you to do for me. Don't punish your sister." I frowned. She has spent her whole life believing love is something you earn by winning. She doesn't understand that love was never a competition. One day she will realize what she truly lost. When that day comes, if your heart allows it, open the door. Tears blurred the words. Dad wasn't asking me to give away the house. He wasn't asking me to forget. He was asking me not to become bitter. As I carefully folded the letter, my phone rang. Rachel, for the first time in over a month. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Dad's final request. I answered. Her voice was barely recognizable. Soft, broken. "Emily." She paused. "I need to tell you something." There was no anger, no accusation, only tears. And somehow, I knew this conversation was going to change both of our lives. I didn't say anything. I simply listened. For several seconds, all I could hear was Rachel crying. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes after you've run out of excuses. Finally, she spoke. "I went to Dad's cemetery today." I closed my eyes. I sat there for almost 2 hours. Another long silence. I kept waiting for him to forgive me. Her voice cracked. But all I could think about was every time I left early. Every phone call I ignored. Every promise I made that I never kept. She took a shaky breath. I thought there would always be another weekend. There it was. The truth grief teaches too late. We always think there's more time. "I found something in my closet yesterday," she continued. It was a Father's Day card my daughter made 3 years ago. I was supposed to drop it off. I never did. I found it still sealed. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't asking for the house anymore. She wasn't arguing about the will. She was grieving. Not just our father, the daughter she could have been. "I'm sorry, Emily." The words came so quietly I almost missed them. "I'm sorry for all of it." I looked down at Dad's letter still resting on my lap. "When that day comes, open the door," I finally answered. "I'm sorry too." She sounded confused. "For what?" "For not telling you sooner how much I needed help." Neither of us spoke. Sometimes healing begins with silence instead of speeches. A week later, Rachel asked if she could stop by the house. Our house. Dad's house. I made coffee before she arrived. When she walked through the front door, she froze. Everything looked exactly the way Dad had left it. His favorite chair, his fishing hat hanging by the hallway, his reading glasses on the side table. Rachel slowly walked into the living room. Then she sat in Dad's chair. For the first time since we were children, she cried in front of me. I wasted so much time. I sat beside her. "We both lost him." She nodded. "But you knew him." I only visited. Before leaving, she handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "I don't deserve it." I opened it anyway. Inside was a key, the spare house key Dad gave me. She smiled through tears. "I don't need it anymore." I closed her hand around it. "No." She looked at me. "Keep it." She frowned. "But the house is yours." "It is." I smiled. "But you'll never need permission to come home." She broke down all over again. This time, I hugged her. Not because the past disappeared. Because carrying it forever wouldn't bring Dad back. Over the next year, things changed. Not overnight. Trust never does. Rachel started coming by on Sundays. Sometimes we'd cook Dad's favorite pot roast. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch without talking. She stopped posting perfect family pictures online. Instead, she started showing up. Her children visited more often. My nieces and nephews filled the house with laughter again. Dad would have loved that. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year after the funeral, I finally finished reading every page of his journal. Tucked inside the last page was one final note I hadn't noticed before. It simply read, "If this house is ever full of laughter again." Then I made the right decision. I looked up from the journal. Rachel was in the kitchen helping my niece bake cookies. The smoke alarm suddenly went off. Kids started laughing. Someone dropped a mixing bowl. Rachel shouted, "I told you to watch the oven." Everyone burst into laughter. The house wasn't quiet anymore. It was alive. I looked toward Dad's empty chair. For just a second, I could almost picture him smiling. And I realized something. The greatest inheritance he left us wasn't the house. It wasn't the savings. It wasn't the journal. It was one final chance to become the family we should have been all along. If he had simply divided everything equally, nothing would have changed. Instead, he revealed the truth. And the truth gave us something far more valuable than property. It gave us another beginning. That's the thing about love. It isn't measured by the words people say after you're gone. It's measured by the ordinary moments they chose while you were still here. If you have someone you love, call them. Visit them. Don't wait for a funeral to tell them what they already deserve to hear. Because one day, the only conversations you'll have left will be the ones inside your own heart.